Claire trusted her sister, Amber, with everything, even her home, her child, and her husband, Jason. But what began as a temporary visit turned into a secret affair, and within months, one of them would end up in a basement freezer while the other vanished without a trace. Claire Mitchell had always lived by the rules. She was methodical, careful, and organized in every aspect of her life. From her job as a school administrator to the tidy suburban home she shared with her husband Jason and their 7-year-old daughter, Lily. Their house sat on a quiet street in Richmond, Virginia, with a neatly trimmed lawn, a white fence, and an American flag fluttering gently from the porch. From the outside, their life seemed untouched by chaos. Inside, things were just as structured. Meals were scheduled, chores were divided, and nothing unexpected ever disrupted the routine. Jason was equally stable. He ran a local construction business that had started small but grown over the years. He was well liked by his crew, respected in the neighborhood, and seen as a devoted family man. While Claire handled the details of their lives, Jason brought warmth and ease. They were a well-balanced team, one steady and the other strong, both devoted to their daughter and to the life they had built. But no life, no matter how perfect it looks, is ever without its cracks. The first crack came when Claire's younger sister, Amber, called her late one night in a panic. She had been evicted from her apartment and had nowhere to go. Claire didn't hesitate. She offered Amber the guest bedroom until she could get back on her feet. Jason was surprised but didn't protest. It was family, and Claire rarely asked for anything. Amber was 10 years younger than Claire and had taken a completely different path in life. Where Claire had planned and built her future piece by piece, Amber had drifted through life on instinct. She was beautiful, impulsive, and untamed. She had tried modeling, acting, and waitressing, never staying in one place or one relationship for long. By the time she moved in, she had already cycled through 2 jobs in 3 months and had been through a messy breakup that left her without a home or income. First, Amber seemed genuinely grateful. She helped around the house, picked Lily up from school when Claire was busy, and cooked the occasional dinner. She slipped easily into their routine, smiling at the neighbors and offering to walk the dog. Claire was relieved. She had worried Amber's presence would cause disruption, but things seemed smooth. What Claire didn't notice were the small changes happening around her. Amber started wearing more revealing clothes around the house, especially when Jason was home. She would come into the kitchen in tank tops and shorts that barely reached mid-thigh. She laughed louder at his jokes, complimented his work, and asked him for help with things she could have done herself. Jason brushed it off at first. Amber was always flirtatious, always dramatic. It was just her nature. But the attention she gave him was different from what he'd grown used to with Claire. Over the years, his marriage had settled into a quiet routine. Claire was still the woman he loved, but their passion had faded beneath schedules, work stress, and the demands of parenting. Amber's energy was a contrast to that, wild, unpredictable, and intoxicating in a way that Jason hadn't realized. He missed. He tried not to notice her lingering looks or the way she touched his arm when she laughed. But even resisting the thought only made it stronger. Amber, on the other hand, was not resisting anything. Living with Claire had always made her feel like the lesser sister. Claire had the house, the husband, the child, everything Amber didn't. Watching Jason, she saw cracks in the marriage that Claire didn't seem to notice. She saw an opportunity. At first, it was just fun, a game of subtle glances and accidental touches. But it didn't stay that way. Amber started looking for ways to be alone with Jason. She offered to help him in the garage. She left him notes, with jokes and compliments. She watched how he responded, learning what made him uncomfortable and what made him hesitate. When he didn't shut her down completely, she took it as encouragement. She told herself it wasn't wrong. She convinced herself that maybe Jason had married the wrong sister. Maybe this was meant to be. Jason, caught between guilt and temptation, said nothing to Claire. He convinced himself it was harmless. Claire, trusting them both, remained completely unaware. To her, life was just as it had always been. She didn't see the trap forming in her own home, nor did she sense that Amber's presence was anything more than temporary. But under the surface, something was shifting, something dangerous. And once the line between fantasy and reality blurred, none of them would be able to go back. It started with a single moment. An afternoon when Jason came home early from work, his shirt stained with sawdust, his shoulders tense from the day. Claire had taken Lily to a piano lesson, and Amber was alone in the kitchen. She offered him a drink, leaned against the counter, and asked about his day. There was something in her eyes, curiosity mixed with challenge, that made Jason pause. She wasn't like Claire, who asked out of habit and looked for answers to match her routine. Amber listened differently, like she wanted to understand who he really was. That moment became the turning point. Jason stayed longer in the kitchen than he meant to. He laughed too loudly, looked at her too long, and when he left, his heart beat faster than it should have. He told himself it was nothing, just conversation, just tiredness. But the memory of Amber's smirk followed him into his sleep. The next time it happened, Jason didn't tell himself it was harmless. He started noticing her in ways that made him uncomfortable. How she moved around the house, how she smelled after a shower, how her voice dropped slightly when they were alone. He stopped meeting her eyes, but that only made her more persistent. She thrived on tension. She wanted to see how far he would go before breaking. Amber had always felt like she lived in Claire's shadow. Growing up, Claire was the one there. Parents trusted, the one praised for her grades and behavior. Amber, with her impulsiveness and craving for attention, had never measured up. But now, for the first time, she had something Claire didn't: Jason's attention. It wasn't just about attraction. It was about winning, about finally being the sister who had something the other couldn't keep. Claire remained oblivious. She was busy juggling work and parenting, proud that things at home were stable despite the stress. She noticed Jason seemed distracted, but she assumed it was work. She didn't suspect her own sister. She couldn't imagine Jason, loyal, kind Jason, would ever cross that kind of line. They had built too much together. She trusted him completely. Amber didn't stop at flirting. She began planting seeds. She mentioned things to Jason about Claire, how she seemed tired lately, how she never noticed when Jason was upset, how she always put Lily first. At first, Jason defended his wife. But the cracks were already there, and Amber knew it. All she had to do was keep pushing. She made herself the opposite of Claire, carefree, spontaneous, full of attention. Jason found himself drawn in despite himself. Then came the night everything changed. It was late. The house was quiet, and Jason was in the garage working on a broken cabinet. Amber came down with a drink, said she couldn't sleep. They talked. The air between them was thick with something unsaid. She leaned in too close, and Jason didn't stop her. When she kissed him, he didn't pull away. It was soft, hesitant, almost like a mistake. But once it happened, it couldn't be undone. Jason spent the next morning in a fog. The guilt twisted in his stomach, but so did something else: desire. The kiss had awakened something he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't love. It wasn't even affection. It was escape. Amber offered him freedom from the routine he didn't realize had started suffocating him. From there, the affair escalated. Quickly, secret meetings in the car, stolen touches when Claire left the room, messages sent through an app Claire didn't know he had. Jason was careful. Amber was reckless. She didn't care if they got caught. She wanted it to happen. She wanted Claire to know. But Jason wasn't ready for destruction. He still loved his wife. He still tucked Lily into bed and helped with her homework. He was living two lives, torn between the comfort of what he knew and the thrill of what he couldn't control. Claire began noticing more. The late-night showers, the missing receipts, The way Jason looked at his phone and quickly turned it face down. Still, she refused to believe the worst. Her husband couldn't be unfaithful. Her sister wouldn't betray her like that. But doubt had crept in, and once it entered the mind, it never left quietly. She started watching them more closely, listening for changes in tone, glancing through drawers she hadn't opened in years. She wasn't looking for proof. She was hoping not to find any. What she didn't know was that the affair had already passed the point of return. Jason and Amber weren't just involved. They were tangled in something much darker, something dangerous. The secrecy made it electric. The guilt made it addictive. Neither of them realized how deep they had gone until Claire found the first clue. And everything began to fall apart. Claire found the lipstick under the seat of Jason's truck. It was a color she would never wear. Too bold, too young. At first, she tried to rationalize it. Maybe Amber had dropped it while helping Jason with groceries. Maybe it had been there for weeks, unnoticed. But the truth had already begun whispering. In her mind, it wasn't just the lipstick. It was everything. The glances, the silences, the way Jason had been slipping away. It was how Amber smiled just a little too long when Jason walked into the room. The way she lingered in the kitchen after dinner, pretending to clean up. Claire had been ignoring the signs, but now she couldn't. She didn't confront them immediately. She watched instead. She started coming home at odd hours, checking Jason's location without telling him, quietly scrolling through their shared tablet when he wasn't looking. What she found wasn't explicit, but it was enough. Deleted messages, strange contact names, location history that didn't match his alibis. Her heart broke quietly, piece by piece. As the truth assembled itself like a puzzle she hadn't meant to solve. One evening, she followed him. He said he had to meet a client at a coffee shop across town. Claire waited 10 minutes, then got into her car. He wasn't at the coffee shop. He was parked 2 blocks away, in a residential area. She didn't need to see what happened inside the house to understand what was going on. Amber had gotten her hooks in deep. When Jason returned home that night, Claire said nothing. Her face was calm, her voice steady. But inside, she was burning. She didn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling for hours, wondering when her marriage had stopped being hers. Wondering when her sister had decided her life was something to steal. The betrayal cut from both sides. Jason, who was supposed to love her, and Amber, who had shared her childhood, her secrets, her trust. The next morning, Claire asked Amber to leave. She said it gently, hiding her fury behind polite concern. Amber pretended to be surprised, even offended, but Claire didn't back down. Within 2 days, she was gone, her clothes packed in garbage bags, her room left eerily clean. Jason didn't protest. He claimed to understand. He said maybe it was for the best. Claire watched him closely after that. He tried to be attentive, tried to make it seem like everything was normal again. But he was distant. His guilt showed in how often he looked at her without speaking, in the way he touched her shoulder and quickly pulled away. He still kept his phone face down. He still smiled too easily when she asked him how work was going. The affair might have ended, but something was still broken. What Claire didn't know was that Jason and Amber hadn't truly stopped. They had simply gone underground. No more house visits, no more lipstick under seats. Now it was all messages, burner phones, whispered phone calls in the driveway. Amber had become more possessive. She told Jason she didn't just want him, she needed him. She began talking about the future. A life without Claire at first. Jason dismissed it as fantasy. But Amber was persistent. She said Claire was the obstacle. The problem. If she were gone, they could be together freely. Jason told her to stop, but the idea had been planted. And once it was there, it grew. He thought about it more than he wanted to admit. He couldn't leave Claire without losing everything. His daughter, his house, his reputation. But if Claire disappeared, things would be different. Amber pushed harder. She began recording their conversations, framing it as a precaution in case he turned on her. She wanted him to commit to something, anything. She hinted at methods, asked him questions, tested his reaction. At first, he didn't engage. Then he started answering. Then he started planning. Claire, unaware of the storm gathering around her, quietly contacted a divorce lawyer. She didn't want revenge. She wanted freedom. She wanted her life back. She made copies of financial documents, changed passwords, and started looking at apartments. She was going to leave him, but she wasn't going to make a scene. She still believed Jason was the man she married. Misguided, maybe, but not dangerous. She was wrong. Jason found out about the lawyer through a mutual friend. That same week, Amber told him she had news. She claimed she was pregnant. She wasn't, but she needed leverage. Jason panicked. Everything was closing in. His wife, his lover, his lies. He felt trapped. The only way out, he thought, was to make Claire disappear before she could ruin him. What started as betrayal had turned into something far more deadly. Jason and Amber weren't just playing with hearts anymore. They were planning something final. Claire had no idea her time was running out. Claire vanished on a Friday. She had left work early after a meeting and never arrived home. Jason told police she had gone to visit her parents with Lily for the weekend. At first, no one questioned him. He appeared concerned, cooperative, even helpful. He made calls, sent texts, and told friends he was worried but confident she'd be back soon. He said maybe she needed space. Maybe it was all just stress. He played the grieving husband well, but Claire's parents hadn't seen her. She hadn't called them, hadn't shown up, hadn't even mentioned a visit. When they tried to call her and received no response, they reported her missing the next morning. That's when police returned to the Mitchell home with more pointed questions. The house was spotless. Too spotless. The basement door was locked, which struck one officer as strange. Jason claimed it was for safety, tools and sharp objects, he said, but the lock was new, installed recently. When asked about Claire's habits, he spoke in generalities. When asked about their marriage, he admitted they had been going through a rough patch. But nothing serious, he insisted. Nothing worth running away over. Meanwhile, Amber had vanished too. Her phone was off, her apartment was empty, and her social media accounts had been deleted. Her landlord said she'd moved out weeks ago. No explanation given. Neighbors hadn't seen her in days. Police now had 2 women missing and 1 man tying them together. 2 days into the investigation, a technician examining the Mitchell home discovered inconsistencies in the freezer in the basement. It had been unplugged briefly, then plugged back in. That detail, small but suspicious, led officers to cut the lock and investigate further. Inside the freezer, beneath layers of trash bags, they found Claire's body. She had been strangled. There were bruises around her neck, ligature marks, and defensive wounds on her hands. She had fought. Her body had been cleaned, wrapped tightly, and hidden under frozen food. The murder had been calculated, deliberate. No signs of a break-in, no forced entry, no robbery. All signs pointed to someone she knew. Jason was arrested that evening. The news spread quickly. Neighbors were stunned. Co-workers, friends, even extended family struggled to make sense of it. Jason maintained his innocence. He blamed Amber, said she had been unstable, that she had shown up, angry, irrational, claiming she was pregnant. He told detectives she had attacked Claire and that he had panicked, covering it up out of fear. He insisted he hadn't killed his wife. He was just trying to protect his family. But the police didn't believe him, and neither did the evidence. A search of Amber's old bedroom revealed a hidden panel in the wall. Inside, detectives found a cheap burner phone. It had no SIM card, but it was filled with audio recordings. Dozens of them. In the recordings, Jason and Amber could be heard discussing Claire, their affair, and eventually, plans to remove her from the picture. The conversations were chilling. Jason's voice calm, clinical. Amber's voice tense, urgent, but persuasive. They talked about options, drugs, accidents, staging a disappearance. Jason mentioned the basement freezer. Amber laughed and called it perfect. There were no recordings of the murder itself, but the planning was enough. Enough to shatter any doubts about Jason's role. Enough to show that Claire's death was no accident, no moment of panic. It was premeditated. The trial moved quickly. The evidence was overwhelming. Jason's defense tried to paint Amber as manipulative, mentally unstable, a seductress who had led him down a dark path. They claimed Jason never intended to go through with anything, that he was caught in a web he didn't know how to escape from. But the jury didn't believe it. He was found guilty of first-degree murder. Still, one piece of the puzzle remained. Missing Amber. No one could find her. She had vanished without a trace. The last ping on her phone was from a rural highway 3 hours away. Her bank accounts were untouched. No surveillance footage. No witnesses. It was as if she had disappeared into thin air. Some believed she had fled the country. Others thought Jason had killed her too and hidden the body better this time. Without her, the full truth remained out of reach. But what was certain was this. Jason Mitchell had planned his wife's murder with the woman who was once her closest confidant. A man who had built a life of stability, routine, and respectability had torn it all apart for a brief, toxic affair. And Claire, who had loved and trusted them both, had paid the price. The house was sold. Lily went to live with Claire's parents. Jason received life in prison without the possibility of parole. And Amber, whether alive or dead, remained a shadow. Over the tragedy, a ghost lingering in every unanswered question. 6 months after Jason's conviction, a body was found along a muddy riverbank in West Virginia. It had washed up during a rainstorm, tangled in roots and partially decomposed. Local authorities initially believed it was a homeless woman, but dental records later identified the remains as Amber Callahan. She had been dead for weeks. Toxicology. Reports found traces of fentanyl, alcohol, and sleeping pills in her system. No signs of physical trauma, no defensive wounds, no evidence of foul play. The coroner ruled it an accidental overdose. News of Amber's death traveled fast. Journalists swarmed the story. The woman at the center of a suburban murder scandal had turned up dead, far from where anyone had been looking. The timing only raised more questions. Some suspected suicide. Others whispered about revenge, conspiracy, or even that Jason had somehow orchestrated it from prison. But there was no proof, only speculation. Police searched the area where her body had been discovered. A half-empty backpack was found buried in the mud nearby. Inside were a few clothes, a fake ID, prepaid debit cards, and a worn leather journal. That journal would provide the final, tragic insight into Amber's descent and the story she had tried to bury in pages smeared with water damage and frantic handwriting. Amber described the affair in detail. She admitted to seducing Jason, to manipulating him, but denied ever intending for Claire to be killed. She wrote about their late-night conversations, their paranoia, and the fear that Claire had found out. Her entries grew darker as time went on, her tone shifting from smugness to panic. Amber claimed Jason had gone further than she expected. She wrote that when she mentioned disappearing, she meant running away, not murder. When Claire turned up dead, Amber wrote that she was horrified. She said Jason blamed her, screamed at her, and told her they were both in it now. Amber described herself as scared and alone, hiding in motel rooms, watching news reports with trembling hands. She wrote about changing her name, dyeing her hair, and taking buses across state lines. Her last entry was dated 3 weeks before her body was found. In it, she confessed to taking pills every night to sleep, to escape the guilt that was rotting her from the inside. She wrote, "I thought I could control him. I thought he needed me. I didn't think he would actually do it." The journal left investigators convinced that while Amber was a manipulative participant in the affair and the planning, she had not physically committed the murder. But her words didn't exonerate her. They simply added another layer to the tragedy. A desperate, unstable woman who played with fire and got consumed by it. Public opinion remained divided. Some saw her as a victim who lost control. Others saw her as the real architect of Claire's death. In the court of law, her story ended without a trial. In the court of public opinion, her legacy was much harsher. Claire's family never fully recovered. Her parents, who now raised Lily, avoided interviews and media attention. They tried to shield the child from the noise, the speculation, the headlines that continued to resurface on social media. Lily knew only that her mother was gone and her father was never coming home. Jason remained in prison, silent during Amber's discovery. He gave no statements, filed no appeals, and received no visitors. His once respected company folded within months. Former friends distanced themselves. His name, once known for building homes, was now synonymous with betrayal and murder. The Mitchell house sat empty for over a year before it was sold to a couple who had never heard the full story. Neighbors avoided walking past it. Some said the house was cursed. Others said it was just another reminder that you never truly know what happens behind closed doors. For those who knew the family, the events left a lasting scar. Claire had opened her home to her sister, believing blood was thicker than suspicion. She had trusted her husband even when doubt crept in. Her loyalty became her downfall. Amber chased what she thought she wanted: attention, affection, validation, and instead set off a chain reaction that ended in 2 deaths and 1 life wasted behind bars. She underestimated the cost of playing with people's lives that in the end, all that remained were fragments. A grieving child, a ruined family, a journal soaked in guilt, a husband condemned by his own voice, a sister buried in a shallow grave. Far from home, the story of Claire Mitchell's murder was not just one of infidelity. It was about obsession, entitlement, and the quiet unraveling of people who thought they could control the storm they had created. A fatal chain reaction started by betrayal and ended in death.